Give me liberty and give me Annette.
Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where I talk about the Constitution, history, politics, and pretty much anything else I want to talk about. You can find this podcast on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you can find podcasts. Also, I'm recording this so you can find the video on YouTube if you want to see what we look like. And today we're going to be talking about why the country is so divided and whether Trump is making it worse or just kind of exposing what's already there. And my guest today is John Ziegler. Hi, John.
Hi, Annette. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Okay.
All right. I asked you for a bio, and you gave me senior columnist at Mediaite and host of Individual One podcast. And that's very succinct and to the point, but you're also an investigative journalist, and you've been on the radio for many years. And on your Facebook page, this is your quote. This is how you bill yourself. A highly opinionated contrarian who has disdain for the news media and is right far more often than they are.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate.
So that's you in a nutshell, for people that don't know who you are. So you consider yourself to be a conservative / libertarian?
Correct.
All right.
Whatever that means in this day and age, by the way. I'm not sure what that means anymore, but but by traditional definitions, I'm a conservative libertarian.
I kind of find myself going in that same direction. I think I used to see myself as just a conservative, but more and more I'm starting to lean towards libertarianism in some areas. So your podcast, Individual One, what is the subject matter of that podcast?
Well, Individual One is President Donald Trump, and we take a look at the Trump presidency from a conservative perspective, but also one that is far more cynical and skeptical than the now what I refer to as state-run conservative media. I am not a fan of Donald Trump, have never been a fan of Donald Trump. I have met Donald Trump well before he ran. And what was a very, I think, interesting and important conversation. My father actually did some significant business with Donald Trump way back in the day. I think I know who Donald Trump really is and is not. He is not a conservative. He's not a Republican. He's not fit to be president. I think he has proven all that in spades. I think the Republican Party will rue the day that he was ever nominated as the presidential nominee in 2016. I think that, I don't know how many years it will take, whether it's a year, 5 years, 10 years from now. I think that it will be the worst decision that the Republican Party ever made. Wow.
So basically you're not a fan.
Well, I mean, you know, the irony is that the portrayal of Trump that he likes to provide for himself, the image that he thinks of himself, it has a lot of qualities that I would normally find appealing. I mean, the anti-media stuff, in theory, I should love, right? Except it's not about being anti-media bias for Donald Trump. It's about being against media that portrays him in a negative light. It's all about him. It's not about the cause or about the substance of the media. If he was constantly fighting against truly false news stories, I could hold my nose for a lot of the other stuff. But that's not what he's doing. He's duping people who already hate the media because it's liberal into thinking that that's what he's doing. But he's really just fighting for his own survival and to be able to get away with things that no other president would ever be able to get away with.
Interesting. So, you know, that what's been going through my mind since you agreed to be on the show, and I've been listening to your podcasts and reading your articles and your interview and everything. And I'm wondering, because it's obvious where you stand on Trump. Do you think that you're still objective about him?
I think I'm incredibly objective about Trump. And the proof of this is that I don't think that there's anybody. And I urge anyone to go through I write about 120 columns a year for Mediaite. And so, I have written, I don't know how many columns about Donald Trump, well over 100 in the last few years. And I would say that at least 40% of them are in situations where I'm either mildly defending Donald Trump or I'm saying, look, this is not going to harm him, whatever has just occurred. In fact, it might even help him. And my track record on that is pretty darn near 100%, if not 100%. If I was not objective, if I had Trump derangement syndrome, which I get accused of a lot, I would be wrong all the time about, oh my gosh, this is going to be the end of Donald Trump, or this is really going to hurt him, because I would not be objective. I'm incredibly objective, partially because my wife is a mild Trump supporter. Her entire family are very strong Trump supporters. I have lived all over the country, and I understand the Trump supporter probably better than most people, having been in talk radio for, almost 2 decades on and off. That's the Trump supporter. I know who these people are. I know how they think. And so to me, the ultimate proof that I am still incredibly objective about Trump is, if I wasn't, I would be wrong constantly in predicting what was going to happen with him. But that hasn't happened at all. In fact, the opposite's been the case.
All right, cool. One of the reasons I asked that is because when we're talking about the divide in the country right now, one of the reasons I've been reading all these articles on why is this divide here, and I think there are 4 or 5 explanations, but one of them in Psychology Today, which was actually the best article I read out of all of them. A lot of them were political hack jobs, but one of them said that we've gotten to a point where it's not even as much about policy or ideology as it is about identity. And so we look at the other side and we say that person's conservative or that person's liberal. And so I hate them for that reason and not because of whatever it is that they disagree with us about. And so I think back to the Obama years, and I can't say that I was objective about Obama when he was in office. Like he did stuff that ticked me off, and it was like, that's it. Like every time I saw him, I almost had a visceral reaction to him. The same way I have the same sort of a visceral reaction to Pelosi. It's just, I just cringe, or Hillary. I just cringe right away. And there's nothing that either one of those ladies could do that I'm going to think is okay. I'd have to go through like a real major change in my thinking before I could.
Because they're not of your tribe.
Yes. And so I think that's where this division is coming. Tell me about this whole tribe thing.
Well, I think you've hit on a large part of why Trump will never be removed from office, because he understands the tribe better and the tribal impact on politics in 2019, 2020, better than anybody. When you are of a tribe, a political tribe, you are invested in believing that your tribe is better than the other tribe. It's much like college football. Auburn, Alabama. You're never going to get Alabama fans to think that Auburn is better than Alabama and vice versa, no matter what the facts are, no matter what the scoreboard says. It's never going to happen. And the genius of Trump was that he was able to, it's amazing, but somehow as a lifelong Manhattan liberal, he was able to convince conservatives that he was not only part of their tribe, but that he should be the leader of their tribe. It's remarkable, but he pulled it off. And so now he has not only taken over the tribe, but he's made the tribe in his own likeness. In literally being a member of the tribe is no longer holding conservative values. It's how you view him personally. That's why I said at the beginning of this interview, I don't know what conservatism is anymore, because it appears as if the definition of conservatism is, are you pro-Trump or anti-Trump? And that's not an exaggeration. So Trump is a genius at this. Trump is a savant in a lot of ways. I think, going back to this issue of my objectivity towards him, I think people have underestimated him in many, many ways. I think that from a book standpoint, he's a bit of a moron, but and a buffoon. But from a street smarts perspective, I think he's close to a genius, if not a savant. I have likened him very much to the HBO character Tony Soprano. in a lot of ways. But he acts a lot like Tony Soprano as a mob boss, but he also acts a lot like Tony Soprano when it comes to his instincts as opposed to his book knowledge. And I think there are a lot of parallels there. And so anyway, regarding getting back to the tribe, to me as a media guy, this all starts with the media. I wrote a book in 2005 called The Death of Free Speech, which dealt with a lot of things, including the fragmentation of our media and what the impact was going to be. And I got to tell you, while no one read the book, it was incredibly prescient, because in 2005, I predicted that we were headed towards a divided America because of the fragmentation of our news media. Television in the 1970s, the 1980s, and maybe the early 1990s was the greatest uniting force technology has ever created. It has now become the greatest dividing force that that man has ever even contemplated, because we've now been fragmented into tiny little tribes, if you will. I look at, in a nutshell, the history of television as going from broadcasting to narrowcasting to cult casting, and now we're into the age of micro cult casting. Mm-hmm. And so therefore everyone is now living in their own little bubble. They're able to determine what information they get, what information they don't get. And it is now a huge part of the business model of many of these outlets, Fox News Channel being the foremost among them, to create essentially fact-free zones where people can feel good about themselves. It's almost an elaborate form of therapy now. Mm-hmm. That's what the news media is. The news media is, you're choosing which form of therapy you want to get for you to deal with the news of the day. The truth doesn't have any impact on that. And especially when it comes to Donald Trump, I mean, there are, whatever percentage of the country it is, somewhere in the 40 percentile, that just want to believe that, Trump may be flawed, but the Democrats are so much worse, and this is all a big witch hunt, and the media's out to get him, and they were wrong in 2016. They're going to be wrong in 2020. That makes people feel good. It's all about making people feel good. And not only it's not just the fragmentation of the news media. There's been a double whammy when it comes, or maybe a triple whammy, when it comes to how the media has changed. The coin of the realm back when we had broadcasting was, what is the truth? That was not that the media was perfect, but that was always at least the first most important characteristic of a story. What's true? Now, the first most important characteristic of a story, because, for instance, on Twitter, you literally see it under any tweet, how many times it's been retweeted or liked, or right. Facebook, the same thing, or it's incredibly easy to determine which stories are popular online, and we get overnight television ratings telling us to the minute which stories popped and which ones didn't. The coin of the realm is no longer truth, it's popularity. Mm. And popularity is determined by what makes people feel good, not by what is the truth. And this is the environment that Trump jumped into and has used to his advantage, and in my opinion has also exacerbated to his advantage. And I don't see how it turns around. I really don't.
Yeah, that's kind of the running theme in my mind as well. You can see the problem, and I agree with you. There's no objective media anywhere. There's no place you can say, well, where do I want to get the news? Unless maybe you want to go Daily Mail or the BBC or something, go outside of the U.S. and try and look from outside. But inside, it's you pick which bias you want. But there's no place to go and just get objective news.
Well, and let's explain why that is. The reason why that is because it doesn't pay. CNN tried that as their branding, right? I mean, that they would be the down the middle news organization. Well, guess what happened? They got passed in the ratings by every other cable news network because it doesn't fit in this micro cult casting world in which we're living. Inherently, people going down the middle, trying to be objective, they don't have a cult. There's no cult for that. The cult is always in people who are most engaged. And if you're most engaged, you have a strong take on something and you have a strong investment emotionally in what the result is. So Fox News Channel gives conservatives what they want to feel, and MSNBC gives liberals what they want to feel. Now, CNN has gravitated more towards the left for a number of reasons. I don't know whether or not it's based in trying to get more of a ratings pie or not, but going straight down the middle just doesn't work from a business model standpoint. And I mentioned a triple whammy earlier. The other triple whammy of this is that the business model for almost every media outlet has broken in the last decade or so, whether it's newspapers, magazines, cable news, television, almost every form of traditional media now, which used to be a license to print money, is now in a very difficult spot. And this causes two major problems that go right into Trump's hands. The first major problem is that for a news person to tell a risky truth, they must have job security. Well, most people in the news media now have no job security because the business model is broken. And if they lose their job, there's not very many good jobs to replace it. So no one wants to tell a risky truth. And what I mean by risky truth is, heck, if you're working for Fox News Channel, you don't want to end up like with Shepard Smith. Shepard Smith was a very popular, talented guy who is no longer there, largely because, whether it was his own choice or Fox News Channel's choice, because he was going up against the cult at Fox News Channel. And so there's no risk reward there. And as far as Trump is concerned, the other advantage he provides is he's ratings gold. And the news media is more desperate now for ratings than they've ever been. The tail is completely wagging the dog. The tail always had an impact, but now it's totally in charge. Trump knows this. Trump has even predicted that the news media will help him get reelected in 2020. And I don't think that that's a crazy concept. I think the news media is terrified of a Joe Biden presidency because other than his daily gaffes, which most of which are harmless, he would be horrendous for their ratings and for their content. See, the news media wants two things. They want easy content and they want ratings. The easy content makes their life a lot easier. These are mostly lazy, stupid people that are in the news media, most of them. And so they want something handed to them on a silver platter. Trump does that multiple times on a daily basis. And so this is almost a perfect storm of how the news media fits right into what Trump wants them to be. He uses it like a savant. He used it tremendously in 2016 during the primaries when they gave him, multi-billion dollars worth of free publicity, and that allowed him to lead a coup of the Republican Party. And the coup has been far more successful than I ever imagined it could have ever been.
So the news media love to hate him, basically. And
they're keeping their jobs because of it.
Right.
The number one thing that every news media person thinks of when they wake up in the morning and when they go to bed is, how do I keep my job? That's all. Don't do anything to risk the gig, because the gig is everything. I don't want to end up, like somebody, like a Matt Lauer or a Charlie Rose or somebody else, where all of a sudden you're a non-person after being. These people are in love with their celebrity and their prestige, their paycheck. These are, especially in the mainstream media, these are still very cushy gigs. But when you lose them, they're almost impossible to replicate. And so no one's going to do anything to jeopardize that. And by the way, getting rid of Donald Trump might jeopardize that for a lot of people. I do believe that if Trump were to be defeated, that it wouldn't be immediate, but eventually it would cause an enormous number of layoffs in the mainstream news media.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So they actually want him reelected despite what they're saying. So that explains the news media. What about the average Democrat and Republican? Why do you think there's so much hatred on one side and love on the other side for Trump? Because obviously the division is huge, but he really exposes it. And I think exacerbates it. But why do you think that love and hate is so strong? I mean, I saw this poll recently, and they were trying to decide why do the blue and red people hate each other so much, right? And conservatives or Republicans would say their top reason was liberals. The liberals or Democrats' top reason was Trump, followed closely by Republicans. But there are such huge, strong feelings, which I don't really understand. Where I'm coming from is I look at Trump, and I'm not sure if he committed an impeachable offense or not. I didn't vote for him because, well, the things that he said about women right off were a big, huge turnoff and said a lot to me about who he is as a person. But now that he's in office, I tend to say, oh, I don't like what he did there. I do like what he did there. And so he's an enigma to me. I don't get him. And maybe if I listen to all of your podcast episodes, maybe I get a better idea. But I don't love or hate him. I don't understand him. Some things I like, some things I don't. So I don't really get this huge reaction that you see out there, because I've been trying to put together an episode where I have an anti-Trumper and a pro-Trumper come together. And I've had anti-Trumpers tell me I can't go on because I'm going to get too angry. I can't do it. And I'm like, well, that's why we need to do this, because I'm trying to demonstrate that people can talk, in a civil way to each other. But if you can't even come on and talk about him without getting upset, yeah, that's kind of why we need to do this. So why do you think it's so strong on both sides?
Well, there's a lot of reasons, but if I had to encapsulate it in one concept, I think the great divide about Trump is, do you see him as the Wizard of Oz, or do you see him as the old man behind the curtain? That's really the divide. So the people who see him as the Wizard of Oz, the man who somehow won the Republican nomination in 2016 when everyone said he couldn't do it, the man who killed the Wicked Witch of the West, Hillary Clinton, in 2016 when everyone said he couldn't do it, the man who survived the Access Hollywood tape when everyone said he couldn't do it, the man who survived the Mueller report when everyone said he couldn't do it. If you see him as the Indiana Jones Wizard of Oz character, then you view everything through that prism. But if you like me and you look at, you go, wait a minute, this whole Wizard of Oz thing is a bunch of baloney. He's just this buffoon behind the curtain, and you need to erase from your mind all of this narrative that somehow he's magical. And by the way, Trump himself on Saturday Night Live referenced that with me, it's just magic. It just works. He's actually used those. That's a direct quote from Donald Trump. So he himself has perpetrated this notion that there's something magical about him. When you realize that there's nothing magical about him, and it's a con, like the man behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz, you see everything about him through that prism. And so it's the prism through which you see reality. Either he's the Wizard of Oz, Indiana Jones, or is the old buffoon behind the curtain. That, to me, is the best way to explain it.
Interesting. Yeah, I know that a lot of women, especially on the left, dislike him intensely because of his history with women, and also because he defeated Hillary. They thought they were going to have their first female president, and that was hugely important to them. And so I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of women hate him. A lot of.
To be fair, I don't know about the assault thing. I think there's some evidence that he has treated women very badly. Whether you would define it criminally or not, I don't know. I don't know if we've ever defined that or gotten to the bottom of that enough. There's certainly been a lot of allegations, but I think any objective person looking at Trump would say that he has at least a somewhat misogynistic view of women. I don't think that that's controversial, right. The way that he views women in general. And so I can somewhat understand why, especially a liberal woman, would have a visceral reaction to him. But like anything else to this extreme, there's a lot of explanations for it. And I think there's a racial element to it as well. He knows how to press buttons, and he's done so exceedingly well. And he's also understood, which no one else has been able to figure out, that because the traditional view of the presidency has always been how do I get 55% approval, right? That's always been the goal. If I get 55% approval, I can govern. Trump has said, no, 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 no. I don't need 55% approval. I need 40% enthusiastic approval and at least one House of Congress. As long as I do that, I'm golden. I can do whatever I want because I don't care about the country or uniting us. I mean, any of those kind of concepts. I only care about myself. And the only way, all I need to be protected is a strong 40% and Mitch McConnell leading the Senate, and I don't care. And he's right about that. That's the way that's a weakness in our system, because we never anticipated that we would have a president who cared only about themselves and not about the country. But this is where we are.
Yeah. So basically, you definitely think that he's exacerbated this division and not just exposed it.
100% he's exacerbated it. I mean, I mean, to me, it's as obvious as could possibly be. I mean, look at how he's defending himself in impeachment. I mean, he's not even trying to substantively argue his case. It's all about these are mean, nasty, horrible Democrats. The process is rigged against me. It's a witch hunt. It's right out of the same playbook that he used in the Robert Mueller Russian investigation. Frankly, and I wrote about this years ago, I believe that the Donald Trump playbook and getting out of trouble is almost exactly the same as the O.J. Simpson playbook. I mean, it's almost exactly the same. How O.J. Simpson got away with murder and how Donald Trump is getting away with new multiple impeachable offenses. And and by the way, Alan Dershowitz is in both situations on the wrong side. And so I don't think that's a coincidence either. I think Trump understands. I think Trump understands better than almost anybody that one, people are not into substance, facts don't really matter, logic doesn't matter, principles don't matter. It's all about making people, the right people feel good about you. And frankly, the other part of the OJ thing is, which is really depressing, but there's a percentage of our population, I don't know what it is, but there's a percentage of our population who enjoys seeing the bad guy get away with it. I really do believe that. I think there's a percentage who enjoys this. The old the clip of Russell Crowe in Gladiator. Are you not entertained? After he's just chopped the head off of the guy. I mean, I think that there's a lot of Donald Trump in that.
I really, really hope that's a very small percentage.
It's not a small percentage. I don't know. I mean, it depends on your definition of small, but I think it's significant. I mean, in fact, if you look, I look at the polls very carefully. Almost every time he becomes more renegade, he bumps a couple of points in the polls. His approval rating goes up a couple of points. It goes back up into the 44, 45 percentile. So there appears to be, in my estimation, 2 to 3% of the population that actually gravitates towards him every time he becomes more OJ-like, which is pretty sad. But I guess those were the people that were holding signs for OJ on the 405 freeway in the Bronco chase. I don't know.
So basically, we're in an us versus them kind of culture now, and we don't want to know anything about them other than how to fight them or how to defend ourselves against them. And it's made worse by our sort of echo chamber that we all get stuck in through social media and through watching news that's biased in the direction that we feel good in. And we have sound bites. Nobody wants to read the whole story. That's why Twitter is so popular. You can just, 144 words or characters or...
It's now up to 280 characters.
Oh, okay. So but we have small bites.
Right.
Where we don't want to read. We don't want to read anything in depth. We don't want to think through anything. And so it's just, we're stuck in this place now where it's us versus them. And it also feels to me like the parties are becoming more extreme because so many people are sick of the parties that they're leaving. And so you have more independents now than you have Republicans or Democrats. And so the people that are left in the two parties are more extreme. And so that's driving the division as well. So You said there were no easy answers. Do you have any ideas of what we can do at this point?
Well, no, I wish I had a clear path. I mean, I think there's some fundamental problems that it's hard to see how they get resolved. I mean, to me, unless 300 media outlets on television suddenly go out of business, or maybe more than that, our media environment's never going to change. In fact, it might only get worse. I mean, with streaming now, even with you have television, and then you have premium cable, then you have streaming, and now you have internet outlets. There are major stories that happen that massive portions of the population never even hear about, because we're so isolated. So I don't know. I don't have an answer on that. To me, in the short run, I really do believe, and I know conservatives aren't going to like to hear this, or Republicans aren't going to like to hear this, I really do believe that Trump must be defeated, because a second term for Donald Trump would make the first term seem like child's play. Based upon his narcissism and his view of getting revenge on people, for him to get away with what he did in the Russia situation, and get away with what he did in the Ukraine situation, and then be reelected for 4 more years without an ounce of accountability, because not only would he not face, in theory, the voters ever again, he doesn't give a rat's anything about. He doesn't give anything about anything, any portion of a rat to about the Republican Party, and so, because normally a second-term president would care about getting clobbered in a midterm election, right? Trump doesn't care at all, even a little bit. In fact, he might even enjoy seeing some of the Republicans that he didn't think were loyal enough to him, bizarrely, get defeated. So you're going to have a second term with a megalomaniac narcissist with zero accountability to the voters, zero care about his party, who has gotten away with massive violations of our constitutional principles, who I can't even imagine what he would do in his second term. And that, to me, is the great danger here. Now, as a conservative, do I want an Elizabeth Warren presidency? Absolutely not. I don't think I want a Pete Buttigieg presidency. I don't even want a Joe Biden presidency, but it's probably the best option we have, because I think Joe Biden would be a one-term president, and we'd be able to potentially regroup and maybe theoretically reset things somewhat. We're never gonna be able to go back to Kansas, using the Wizard of Oz analogy again. Mm-hmm. Kansas is gone, but I think a Biden presidency would give us some semblance of normalcy. So someone like me, I'm basically a man without a country. I don't really have much of a rooting interest in this, other than I want people to understand that a second Trump term would be unique in a very dangerous way. And I truly believe, and I don't think this is hyperbole, I really don't, because I believe in every fiber of my being, if we reelect Donald Trump, we are changing the fundamental nature of our government. We are becoming a monarchy. And people at least need to understand that that's what you're voting for. You're not just voting for Donald Trump because you like the fact that he fights the media. You are voting to change our entire form of government to literally what we fought a revolution against. And I just want people to understand that. I mean, if you choose that, that's fine. That's fine. Just know that's what you're choosing.
All right. I like to have some kind of an answer, I like to have some kind of a solution here. Why are the libertarians not stepping up and saying this is the perfect time for a third party? Because as a conservative, I feel the same way. I look at it and I think, well, if I don't vote Trump, I'm not going to hold my nose and vote for Biden or Warren or anyone like that. With the parties being so out of favor in general, why do we not have a third party stepping into this right now?
This has been something that's been talked about for decades. I mean, you can't make it work because the system, you're bucking a very ingrained system. The only way, in my view, that a libertarian party could ever make real inroads would be if by some magic, and we're now living in an era where there are very few people that have this kind of stature. But if some massively popular celebrity decided to run for president as a libertarian and had unlimited resources behind them, like if Michael Bloomberg was willing to fund a Tom Hanks presidency on the libertarian ticket, then you would need that kind of a black swan event to change the structure. We saw, Ross Perot effectively elected Bill Clinton in 1992, and it didn't change anything, with his third party run. So, I mean, the system is so ingrained that while it's theoretically possible, it would take a massive, as I said, black swan event to change it, which I don't see, because everyone in power is invested against it. And when everyone in power is invested against it, it's even on both sides, it's awfully difficult to beat that. I'm sorry I don't have a good answer for you. I mean, look, I mean, there are some good things about America. I mean, somehow I think one of the great things we should take out of the Trump presidency is how we have somehow been able to survive having a lunatic in the White House, that our economy is still good. The stock market is near record highs. Unemployment is low. We're at peacetime. I mean, it's remarkable what we can withstand in this country. So that, to me, is the silver lining of it.
You don't think Trump had anything to do with any of those good things that are happening?
If you can tell me what he did, I'd be happy to contemplate that he had something to do with it. I mean, what did he do?
I don't know. I was just thinking maybe
I get that.
Out of war.
Okay. So by the way, just for the record, if you think he had something to do with it, then I guess you also have to give Obama credit for having done exactly the same thing, because there's nothing that's fundamentally changed about the economy during the Trump era. It's gone in the exact same trajectory it had during the Obama presidency. I didn't give Obama any credit for that then. I'm not going to give Trump any credit for that now, unless you can tell me what he did. Yeah, I guess the tax cut helped a little bit. But by the way, we took out a massive loan from China on our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, our great-great-grandchildren, in what it was referred to as our debt and our deficit that has exploded in the last 3 years in a way that if it occurred in an Obama presidency, conservatives would be screaming bloody murder about.
Nobody cares about it. Nobody cares about
this prosperity for not just the rest of my life, but the rest of my children's lives and beyond that. No one on the conservative side wants to talk about that anymore because it's inconvenient. But what a shock that would happen when you make the king of debt your presidential candidate. What a stunner. What a stunner that we would end up with exploding deficits. Who could have possibly seen that coming?
I'm sensing just a smidge of sarcasm in there. Well, thank you. I actually like the idea of a Tom Hanks presidency. I don't know about the Bloomberg money behind him, but maybe some other backer. Well, we don't have any great answers, but it's been a fun conversation. You make a lot of great points. I'm hoping that somehow the country can wake up a little bit, because I know I'm not the only one that is uncomfortable with this divide. And I know there are a lot of us out there that don't want to be part of a team, and we just root for the captain no matter who he is. I think there are a lot of us who want to be able to have reasonable discussions with people of the opposing party and actually talk about the issues and actually think about things and not just feel good about things. I think there are a lot of us that want objective news. So I'm really hoping some way that as a country, we can all kind of make a decision that we're not going to go down the path that we're currently on. I don't know how that's going to happen. I'm going to try and do my small part and hope and pray that everyone else will start feeling the same way. And maybe we can have some miracles, like a Tom Hanks presidency. All right. Well, where can we find your podcast?
Best place to go is freespeechbroadcasting.com or my Twitter feed, which is Zygmunt Freud. But the podcasts, I do two podcasts, Individual One and The World According to Zig, which you can find in most places, iTunes, SoundCloud, Whooshka, what have you. So check them out if you get a chance.
Great. Thank you for joining me. And if you want to comment on this podcast, go to AnnetteTalks.com. Go to YouTube, watch, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. And thank you for listening.